Dr. Perlmutter, what surprised you most or stood out to you in terms of what you saw during your time there in Gaza?
Retrospectively, what surprised me most was not the anticipated effect of a 2,000-pound or a 500-pound American bomb being dropped on a tent city, bombs that were designed for busting bunkers in Afghanistan, but rather how the carnage that was induced really focused on children, healthcare workers, and journalists. Those that were the most innocent, those that provided care, and those that would report to the world the accuracy of the carnage were specifically targeted.
When you say specifically targeted, can you go into more detail what you mean
Sure.
by that?
Absolutely. We found children, many workers found children, not just myself, that had high velocity bullet wounds, sniper bullet wounds, rifle wounds, that were dead center in the chest. I've mentioned to other reporters that I couldn't put my stethoscope more dead center over a heart than the entrance bullet hole was. There was no back to these children. The bullet had removed their entire torso. There was a similar bullet hole in two of the children's temples. So they were shot twice. Once was certainly a kill shot. The second one was when they were on the ground. And so no sniper hits a child, and I'm talking toddlers, twice by mistake. And that finding was duplicated by many healthcare workers, that children were specifically targeted by high velocity rifle bullet wounds. And then there was a plethora of healthcare workers with horrible stories of being specifically targeted. And then, of course, journalists were either assassinated, not allowed back into the country, or had their equipment destroyed.
Yeah, and as you would imagine, that's quite an extreme allegation to make, that these civilians were indeed targeted. These are allegations that you made in a CBS News interview, and an IDF spokesperson in response to that said that the IDF has never and will never deliberately target children. The IDF stressed that it calls and acts for the evacuation for civilians from combat zones. And of course, CNN cannot independently verify any of these allegations that you've just made. The Gaza European hospital was asked by the IDF to evacuate at the start of July. Dr. Sidwa, can you walk us through the implications of a hospital evacuation? The IDF will say that that's where Hamas was hiding among civilians. Obviously, you've got patients there that need to be relocated in the midst of war. What is that process?
Yeah, so I think the way you said it is a bit misleading. The Israelis didn't ask European hospital to evacuate; they forced them to, under threat of violence. And when that's done, obviously no hospital can withstand a direct attack from an armed military. While Mark and I were there, not only did we never see any type of combatant whatsoever, but neither did anyone else, injured or otherwise. So there's the claim that Hamas is running any hospital in Gaza, let alone European hospital where we were, is just transparently ridiculous. But yeah, no, the implications of forcibly evacuating a hospital under threat of gun and bombardment is exactly what you'd expect. The sickest people will die. People who can make it out will make it out. Some of the physicians and nurses very bravely stayed, tried to wait until the last moment, but eventually they had to leave too. So yeah, it's a disaster.
Do you have a sense of how many physicians and nurses remain in Gaza right now?
I don't. The Medical Aid for Palestinians released an update on June 26th saying that the 500th Palestinian healthcare worker in Gaza had been killed. The overwhelming majority of them are Palestinian. And that represents 2.5% of Gaza's healthcare force. That's 1 out of every 40 people that works in healthcare in Gaza. So it's a massive blow. A lot more have fled. Actually, the director of the hospital that we worked at had fled just before we got there because he was constantly threatened by the Israelis. And in fact, every departmental director at European Hospital showed us text messages that they had from the Israelis threatening them, telling them to leave, telling them we're going to get you just like we got Shifa, things like that. It's pretty.
That was in the language itself. We're going to get you just like we got Shifa.
Yes.
Yes.
Dr. Perlmutter, I know that you treated a local healthcare worker by the name of Tamer.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about him?
Sure. And this story will argue against the accusations that, or the claims of the IDF that nobody was targeted, no innocent person was targeted. Tamer is an orthopedic nurse. He was in the operating room closing a wound after a surgery when an Israeli soldier came into another hospital, not the one we were working in. This is a hospital that was already occupied by the IDF. They ordered him to abandon the patient who he was closing the wound on. He refused to do so. So he was shot in the knee. His proximal tibia bone, or his shin bone, was sent across the room. He was obviously unconscious from that assault. He was then operated on. He recovered the next day, consciousness. The next day, he was taken prisoner by the Israelis and taken into Israel to an Israeli prison. He was handcuffed. He was blindfolded for 45 days. He received absolutely no wound care. He was fed a juice box, by his report to me, sometimes every day, mostly every other day. And then on the 45th day, after they discovered that he wasn't Hamas, they let him go by dumping him on the side of the road on the other side of the border. He crawled for 3 kilometers. His wound is now horribly infected. As a goodbye present, they gave him a rifle butt in his right eye. They blew out his globe, meaning that he's blind forever. And he crawled and was picked up by a passerby and was brought to the hospital where we took care of him. Okay. So he was tortured. He was starved, tortured, totally abused, received no medical care, and initially shot when he didn't have to be shot for doing his job delivering health care.
And again, we should note that CNN has reached out to the IDF for comment on this. Obviously, we can't independently verify these allegations and the disturbing description that you just provided us.